Many other stories I could tell you like that of incredible things which happen when we seriously give ourselves to the ministry of prayer and intercession. Don't expect much to happen unless you become that serious. And as you pray, God will place a call upon your life. He'll clarify things for you. And the calling of one is never to be compared with another. This is point number 3, the call of God. I've been called to do whatever I do. You've been called to do something else. It's all valid. I get to speak a little bit more, and I wander around the world to all those places in the world that none of you are ever going to join a tourist tour on, because it's a bit dangerous, some of the places I get to. But that's my job. Your job might just be a Sunday school teacher. My mother, who later became a believer in our home, she had to leave school when she was, 12 or 13 or something, looking after the family. Her father was an alcoholic. Her mother had died of cancer. She was uneducated. But she went to that same little church that I went to. She became the superintendent of the kindergarten. And the kindergarten floor was below ground level. Every time it rained, it had about a foot of water in there, and she'd have to bail it out. And for years she went there. And for, about 35 years, she was the superintendent of that little kindergarten. That's the church, which every few years was throwing out another full-time worker. And she was laying the foundation. Amen. So when she came, before she died, to visit me in Melbourne, I surprised her on one Sunday morning. We were there, and I said, Conrad, we have 13 different congregational meetings throughout the day on Sunday, and 3 or 4 different auditoria. But I was in the main one that sits about 1,100, and it was packed with people. I said, friends, I've got someone I'd like you to meet today. I gave a big build-up. I said, my mother is here. Mother, stand up. And so she stood up. I got her up on the platform, and she was nervous. I said, speak, Mother, you've always wanted to speak to a crowd. They want to hear what you've got to say. Oh, she was so traumatized. And she would often say, oh, Stuart, I wish I could be like you, to speak like you do. I'm just doing this little thing. I said, Mother, you have used every one of your talents, laying a foundation to the lives of these young people. And you are 10 out of 10. I'm not sure that I've even used 5 of my talents. Never compare yourself with someone else. Amen. But you do need to know what your calling is. In my case, Galatians chapter 1:15 applies. God set me apart from birth. Amen. As I said, we didn't have God in our family at all. And yet I had some mystical, undefined sense of God's call. When I was about 5 or 6 years of age, because we were very poor, lived in the edge of a swamp, in a little, just a house with a couple of rooms. Toilet was out the back, no running water initially, no electricity, those sort of things. I never had shoes to wear until I went to high school. And we were always out hunting for food. And I knew that in the bush up the road, a little old lady lived in there, and she had some fruit trees in the back. And one day I snuck through the bush and saw that she wasn't home. So I got up the fruit tree. Oh man, they had mandarins or something like that. And I stuffed myself. Oh, this is so good. Now I better get out of here before she comes home. And as I started to descend, I looked down. Here's this great big billy goat with big horns sticking up. Oh no, I can't get down. I had to wait until she came home, and she said, come down here, young man. She took me up into her house. It was a house with no electricity and very dark. We went into the kitchen. You could see through the cracked floorboards downstairs, and she leaned over me and she said, young man, one day you will become a missionary. I thought, wow, I don't know what that that is, but it sounds pretty severe punishment for just stealing a bit of fruit. You have no idea of the impact that you can make on people's lives. Be careful with your words, but I never forgot. And so as soon as I became a believer, I started to preach. That was the call of God. I used to go into the bushes and I'd preach at the trees. They were so responsive, they'd sway according to my appeal. And I thought, hang on, I'm a Baptist at this stage in my life. So I went down to the local, just down the road, the culvert, and I'd sit under the bridge and I'd preach at the cement wall on the other side. Oh, that was excellent training to preach to Baptist congregations. There's no one way that God calls an individual. Consider Abram, Moses, Gideon, David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Matthew, Peter, Paul. Think of those guys and the way God intersected with them. Each of them was unique to their ability to hear their situation, and God tailored his message and his method to their understanding. But the one thing that is common is that when we know God's calling us, we'll do everything we can to dodge it. So Moses in Exodus chapters 3, 4 and 5, he's unworthy, he says. He feared that he'd be rejected, that he wouldn't be believed, that he wasn't very eloquent, that he was inferior, that he'd only be the cause of a lot of trouble, which he was. Gideon, Judges chapter 6, verse 15. Oh, I'm inferior. I'm in the wrong family. I'm too young. Jeremiah, chapter 1, verses 6, 8, and 9. I can't speak. I'm too young. I'll be rejected. We're very good at thinking up these sorts of excuses. On the other hand, there is Samuel as a young man. Here am I, Lord. Saul out with the donkeys until he turned into one himself. David out with the sheep. The most unexpected call to go to a young strapping kid out amongst the sheep. And so I was called to Asia. That was the easy part. I didn't mind leaving Brisbane for the great adventure. But to be called back to Australia after only 14 years, when Margaret and I assumed that we'd be here for the whole of our lives, and it took us 12 years before the first people responded from the majority community. And now it's year 14, and some people in Melbourne start to insist that God wants me back in Melbourne, and I'm saying, what would I go to Melbourne for? There are churches galore down that place, empty mausoleums in every suburb. I'm out here alone amongst a couple of million of these people, and we're just starting to see historic breakthroughs. Lord, you wouldn't do this to me. I know I'm a sinner. I know I'm not much of a missionary, but would you so punish me by throwing me onto the scrap heap of Melbourne? Come on. But that was God's call, and I had to grapple with that and come back, having no idea why I was coming or what I should do. I didn't know what you do in Sundays in churches. It seemed pretty boring to me. And on the first Sunday, walking up to that place of our new appointment, I felt the Spirit say, my spirit is not in this place. And I said, have I just made the biggest mistake in my life? Have I got the wrong address? Silence. And it was months later when the Lord started to reveal why he brought me back. And that had to do with forming a totally different sort of church from what existed at that time, when churches were dying all over the place, and they continue so to do. He wanted to do something quite different. And once I knew that, oh, that would mean we'd have to relocate, we'd have to find land, we'd have to build buildings, we got no money. This is going to cost tens of millions of dollars. Lord, this is crazy. And remember his clearly saying, Stuart, this is not about geography in relocation. The relocation is a means that I'm going to use to stir the untapped spiritual sludge which has accumulated in this well-known group of people over the years, and you are my stirring rod. To which I reply, Lord, the people are going to kill me, so why don't you just kill me right now? History. But in determining the call of God, never come to that decision by yourself. You are part of a community. I know that Australian society is heavily individualized. We live in these silos. We forget we're part of a community called church. These are our brothers and sisters. And you will each know somebody whom you respect in the Lord. It might be an aunt or an uncle or a pastor or a grandfather or someone. Some people in your community. When you feel that God is calling you to do something, go and test that call with the people who have authority. And you don't move until they sign off on it. And that'll save you from making unnecessary blunders.